Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the July 11th meeting of the Comox Valley Sewage Commission. I'd like to gratefully acknowledge that our meeting is taking place on the unceded territory of the Comox First Nation, the traditional keepers of this land. And we have most of our directors in the room here, a couple online, and we will be going in camera at some point in the meeting. So we'll hopefully move through this section relatively smoothly. And we'll start off with the resolution status report from July 2023. A motion for receipt, please. Moved by Grant, seconded by Herr. Any questions or comments? Anyone opposed? That is carried. And we'll move on to the Sewage Advisory Committee minutes from June 29th, 2023. A motion for receipt, please. Moved by McCollum, seconded by Kerr. Any questions or comments? Anyone opposed? And that's carried. Under reports, we have stage 1 and 2 liquid waste management plan, provincial review, and proposed path forward for stage 3 report. A motion for receipt, please. Moved by Grant, seconded by Hazlitt. And I'll take this opportunity to welcome alternate director Hazlitt to the table, sitting in for Director Swift today. And we'll turn it over to staff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm pleased to introduce Zoe Berkey, Senior Engineering Analyst, who will introduce this staff report. So over to Zoe.
Thank you, James. Through the CEO and the Chair to the Commission, I have prepared a brief PowerPoint to walk us through this report today. And feel free to stop me at any point and ask any questions. There's a lot of information in this report. So as a little refresher, in 2018, I can, 1 second. Having problems changing slides, bear with me. There we go. So in 2018, we started the LWMP process for the core wastewater service. And late last year, we submitted our stage 1 and 2 LWMP report to the province. And within that report, we had our preferred treatment selection, which was secondary treatment of all wastewater flows, and the inclusion of UV disinfection. In addition, we had included the possibility of reclaimed water use at the plant as a resource recovery consideration, but had flagged that we needed to do a business case looking at that a little bit closer before we made a final decision. So since the middle of the stage 1 and 2 report, we have gone and done a lot of additional work, and a lot of other things have happened. So we've had the approval of the Sewer Extension South Addendum to be incorporated within the Comox Valley Sewer Service Liquid Waste Management Plan. We've submitted our stage 1 and 2 LWMP. We've also done a lot of site master planning work with AECOM, and we selected a secondary treatment technology. So as a refresher, last September, we brought forward a report that talked about the fact that we can do secondary treatment, but there's a lot of ways we can do it. So we agreed to continue with conventional activated sludge treatment. And then we proceeded to do a value management review of that draft site master plan that was developed by AECOM. And I'll touch on that a bit more in a few following slides. And finally, just a couple months ago, we received the letter with recommendations from the Ministry of Environment on our stage 1 and 2 LWMP. So from all that work, there's a lot of things that need to happen to go to our stage 3, submittal of our stage 3 report. So kind of summarize here the 4 key pieces of work that we see needing to be done as key inputs to that stage 3 LWMP report. And just as a reminder, the stage 3 report is really key as it provides us that new updated operational certificate for the wastewater treatment plant and the boring approval for our future capital upgrades. So the 4 pieces of work we see are process optimization, which feeds into the stage 3 report, but also feeds into the finalizing of that site master plan and ultimately the detailed design of those phase 4 upgrades. The South Region LWMP addendum, And then a bunch of other items as kind of outlined in that letter from MOE that need to be reflected in that stage 3 report. So I'll walk through each of these in a little bit more detail, starting with the process optimization. Oh, sorry, maybe as a refresher, just some of the challenges that we see at our wastewater treatment plant and the feedback we receive from the value management experts. So we have some capacity and some effluent quality concerns, and we see there's kind of, additional tankage that could be added at the plant, or some process optimization that could be done to extend or optimize the use of the tanks we already have before we have to build new ones. There are redundancy requirements for those tanks under the municipal wastewater regulation. We have an electrical room that's in poor condition and is an operator safety concern. We have the condition of our headwork and our grid equipment. The plant was constructed in the 1980s and it's old and it needs replacement. We also have this challenges around peak wet weather flows. We see 3 times our average dry weather flow in the winter, and that causes treatment challenges in its own right. Solids management, we have the liquid stream, but we also have the solid stream. How do we upgrade that system and make sure that it matches and we have enough capacity moving forward? And then ultimately, how do we fit this all on the site that we have, and what's the most functional and the right layout as we kind of stage and continue to accommodate future upgrades. So the first piece to that is the process optimization. And this was a key feedback from the value management workshop we did in May, which we had 5 process experts come and just kind of pick apart and review and look for value alternatives of our draft site master plan. And all of them came out and said, whoa, wait a second. There's an option here to just really improve the process you have at the plant that can delay a lot of the tankage or the capital upgrades associated with being at capacity with the tanks we already have. And that comes down to a couple different factors. Well, actually a lot of factors, as you can see here. So the process optimization expert is trying to kind of help us decide where on this graph we sit. So the intersection of all of these lines is a rated capacity of our secondary treatment, so our bioreactors and clarifiers. And through chemical addition, changing of how we aerate, a number of things can impact all of these different variables and impact that ultimate rated capacity of the tanks we already have. So our goal with the process optimization expert is to come in and be like, start tweaking the process, understanding what is an achievable SVI, which is a sludge volume index. And that's kind of the key here is we need to lower our SVI to increase the capacity in the tanks we already have. If we can't do that, we need to build more because right now they're kind of already operating over capacity. So this expert is going to help our operations team kind of, do some bench testing, figure out how and what is an achievable SVI to help us inform our final site master plan. Because without knowing where we lie on this graph, it's pretty hard to kind of finalize our site master plan. And so that other scope of work that I talked about was the finalization of the site master plan and the detailed design for the phase 4 upgrades. So that site master plan, as you can see here on the left, our existing tankage is already rated below our current population projections. And we're trying to figure out where between this yellow and this green line, by making some process changes, do we land, ultimately pushing out kind of our new tankage into like these future years, 2060, 2070 versus right now. So the process optimization expert will help us with the SVI component, and the other piece of that is I&I reduction. So if we can limit the peaks at our plant to 2 times our average dry weather flow instead of the 3 that we're currently at, that buys us a lot of time as we just don't have to process quite as much water in the winter months. And so that's working with municipalities, and that's also, we're kind of as part of this finalizing the site master plan, do a bit of a business case of, okay, if we can't get our flows down to that 2 times the average dry weather flow, what is the cost impact of having to add that tankage now to kind of help inform that discussion around I&I reduction. And then ultimately, we'll finalize that site master plan and we'll do the detailed design for the phase 4 upgrades. So regardless of how good we get our SVI and what we can kind of commit to as a reduction in our inflow and infiltration, the headworks, the grit, and the electrical room still need upgrades now. There's some health and safety concerns with our electrical layout, and the headworks and the grid are just in very poor condition. And as outlined in the letter from the MOE, we need a Class B cost estimate for that first round of upgrades as part of the Stage 3 LWMP report, and that requires a 60% design to have a Class B estimate. In addition, the South Region LWMP addendum will be getting worked into our Stage 3 report. So the planned timeline for that is the Stage 2 addendum will be submitted in winter 2024, and then we will include the reviewed addendum by the MOE in Stage 3 as part of that Stage 3 report. So ultimately, this Stage 3 LWMP report will have that site master plan, the Phase 4 upgrades, and the Class B cost estimate, an environmental impact study, timing of our outfall replacement, discussion on source control, and commitments to I&I reduction. The final recommendations on resource recovery, that one being primarily reclaimed water use at the treatment plant. Cost impacts to users, continued engagement with First Nations in the TAC pack. And then once we've submitted this report, we also, through the LWMP process, are required to have the establishment of a plan monitoring committee. So kind of transitioning away from the TAC pack to a monitoring committee that kind of monitors our implementation of the upgrades and work through the LWMP. So it's a lot of work. Our kind of proposed timing is to start this process optimization right away so that we can kind of get 8 to 9 months of data before we have that detailed designer engineering consultant on board to do the site master plan and the Phase 4 upgrades. So spring, summer next year, we'll be looking to finalize that site master plan. And then winter of 2024, we'll have the Phase 4 Class B cost estimate and the provincial review of the South addendum complete. We'll be able to package that all up in addition to the work that we're doing on drafting of the Stage 3 plan to hopefully submit the whole plan by spring 2025 with an estimated review period of about a year for the ministry, wrapping it all up for a final approval of the plan in 2026. That's all from me. Happy to answer any questions.
Thanks very much. You certainly have your work cut out for you over the next few years. I will just acknowledge that Director Hardy from Area B is in the gallery today, and Director, you're welcome to ask any questions if you have any in relation to this. Any questions or comments from Commission members? And we have Director McCollum.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks for the report. I am coming through on the mic, right? It's quiet. Yeah, I just had a question about the ICI and inflow reductions and how that's being modeled. And I mean, it seems to me that there's kind of continuous work being done on this front at the municipal level, and some of it's quite expensive if there's, you know, leakage of stormwater into a sewer line. It involves digging up roadway for the most part. And so it's my understanding that there are kind of incremental improvements happening. And so I guess my first question is, like, what is the trend currently with the work that's been done, say, over the last like 5 to 7 years on that reduction? And if we're just to continue on with that, you know, incremental improvement, what would that look like?
Yeah, I think we're seeing some improvement in that I&I. The reality is that our I&I is still quite high as compared to other municipalities. I know the like sealing of the manholes in Lewis Park went a long way in reducing some of those peaks we see in the winter. The feedback we've, you know, it's definitely still there and is still a large contributor to those peak wet weather flows is inflow and infiltration. You know, that 2 times is kind of what we've been told by our value management experts is the magic number, and we're not there. We're kind of closer to 3. So there is going to be some work that needs to be done, and that is kind of part of our hope of this work is to kind of, you know, provide a bit more of like, what is the cost impact at our wastewater treatment plant if we don't do these I&I improvements, understanding that they are costly, to provide a bit of a business case of, okay, well, this is the benefit of doing additional I&I work. We can delay this tankage and provide this much more capacity at our plant to kind of help inform that discussion and those decisions. But yeah, I think that the I&I is still higher than we would like to see it.
Yeah, that's helpful. So basically there's some significant additional work that would be required to reach that ×2 rather than ×3.
Yeah.
And then just as a follow-up, are there specific areas or specific projects that could be identified that would, be especially helpful as opposed to just, regular maintenance improvements? Or like you'll use the example of down at Lewis Park, are there other areas that have been identified that could be prioritized to meet that objective?
Hard for me to answer as we don't manage the collection systems. That's municipal. So I'm not sure, Chris, if you have any ideas or inklings of areas that are problem areas.
Through the chair, yeah, as Zoe mentioned, we don't manage the collection system, but from what we understand, the municipalities have done periodic reviews of I&I. So I think there's a fairly good sense of what can be done. I think, like Zoe mentioned, just to reiterate that, I think that what we plan to do, the analysis here that we plan to do will provide quantification of that to support the business case. Because as you've mentioned, it can be very expensive to correct some of these connections and just kind of systematic leakage of manholes and pipe penetrations into the manholes. So I think if we can provide a very clear idea of just how much those major tankage projects can be deferred and quantify that in a dollars per year kind of a thing, provide that to the municipalities, and in combination with the knowledge they already have about where the trouble areas are, it could help to build the business case in terms of tying it directly to avoided increase in regional sewer fees to the municipalities, which is one of the biggest line items, if I understand correctly, on your budget.
Yeah, that makes good sense. Thanks for that answer.
And we do still call them manholes, do we?
So far, yes.
Thanks. And online we have Director Cole Hamilton.
Thanks very much, Chair. I think actually I'm realizing my question was largely covered by Director McCollum's questions. It seems that the going from a 3-to-1 to a 2-to-1 ratio is that's a big move. And I was just wondering what sort of low-hanging fruit or kind of obvious first moves we had in mind, because that's obviously going to be a substantial process. But I imagine this has been, would it be fair to say that most regional district systems operate at a 2-to-1 sort of ratio? And if so, are there sort of obvious changes that we can see that they've made that have helped them achieve that?
So in terms of typical, so as Zoe mentioned, we're at 3, sometimes even 3.5 times turn up ratio from our kind of base flows in the summer, which is relatively high. These I&I does tend to be proportional to the age of collection systems. So in the older parts of both communities, you would see the higher levels of I&I. The newer, recently, annexed or expanded areas would have the lowest I&I. One of the kind of the biggest contributors are cross connections in the older parts of both towns, city and town, where in the past, either by accident or because the grades didn't work out, downspout, so on-site storm lines are connected into the sanitary rather than the storm. So you'll have roof gutters draining directly down into the sewer because like I said, either it was mistakenly connected to the sanitary, or the elevation just didn't work out for connection to the storm. So one of the tests that's done frequently to assess that is smoke testing. So they'll put smoke bomb into a manhole, and then that smoke will actually travel up because it's lighter than air, will travel up the upgrade in the system and come out of gutters and very clearly show which ones are cross-connected. The problem is, as has been discussed, it can be quite expensive in tight urban areas to dig down to those depths, and if the grades didn't work to start with, they probably don't work now. So it can be quite expensive to affect those changes, which is why our thought is having a much clearer idea of what's at stake in terms of the regional cost, which get directly translated to the municipal budgets, could help to clarify and strengthen the business case for tackling those harder to solve issues.
Thanks, Chris. And I guess I'm thinking perhaps one of the challenges in sort of orchestrating this might be also that the savings are equal throughout the valley in terms of sort of increase or decrease of the cost per cubic meter, whereas the expenses required to do the remediation will vary between municipalities in terms of the type of work that needs to be done and the cost of it.
That's true, although because costs for the service are allocated based on flows, there is an incentive for each participant to reduce their I&I because it'll translate to, I mean, unless everybody's doing exactly the same level of work, it could translate to a reduced fraction of the total sewer cost that jurisdiction gets attracted to. So there is an incentive, just like there is on the water side to reduce consumption. There's a strong incentive on the wastewater side to reduce the amount of wastewater that's being sent to the pump stations. And in the case of I&I, that's just pure water that's coming in through downspouts and leaking manholes that the community is paying for.
Okay. Yeah, thanks so much, Chris.
Yeah, thanks for that. Any further questions or comments from commission members or staff? All right, we'll vote on receipt. Is there anyone opposed to receipt of this report? That is carried. Thanks very much. And it looks like we have a recommendation moved by Grant, seconded by McCollum, that the Comox Valley Sewage Commission approve the proposed path forward as described within the staff report dated July 4th, 2023 to complete the necessary study work required to submit the stage 3 liquid waste management plan. Any questions or comments? All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. Thank you. And we'll move on to item number 3, the groundwater protection policy update and a motion to receive the report dated July 4th, 2023, please. Moved by Grant, seconded by McCollum, and back to staff. Looks like Chris.
Yeah, thanks very much. Chris LaRose, General Senior Manager of Water Wastewater Services, will introduce the report. Chris.
Thank you, James, and through the chair. So early last year, the commission approved the Lazo Hill groundwater protection policy, which the objective being to reassure concerned residents in the area that the CVRD is serious about protecting groundwater. So commitments within the policy include that we will do everything possible to build a system that won't leak. But that will undertake annual leak detection and ongoing groundwater monitoring to quickly pick up on a leak if in a very unlikely event that one were to occur. Also having all materials, designs and relationships, contracting relationships in place to repair a leak if one were to occur as quickly as possible. And finally, to provide potable water to residents whose well is impacted by a leak from the conveyance pipe. However, over the last couple of months, there have been some significant changes to the alignment of the project, which could affect the need for or our ability to achieve some of the commitments that are embedded within the groundwater protection policy. So those key changes are the shift away from the horizontal directional drilling, the larger inherent separation of the pipe from the Quadra Sands aquifer, the shift away from some of the existing groundwater monitoring wells that were established. There's 8 or 9 of those that were set up at the beginning of the project, some of which are now quite far away from the proposed from the preferred alignment. And then finally, there's been some change of infrastructure, some of which was required for pressurizing the Lazo Hill crossing to allow for the acoustic leak detection. So the report has a recommendation that staff be directed to bring forward an update to review the policy and then bring forward an update to the policy, taking into account the change in scope, and that would happen in the fall after the design build procurement process is complete and we have a certainty over the scope that will be delivered. So just want to say that the staff remain fully committed to protecting groundwater in the Lazo area. the changes to the groundwater protection policy are intended to keep the document relevant and reflective of the actual scope being delivered. That's it for me, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Chris. Questions or comments? There appear to be none, which suggests that everybody is happy with the report. So we shall vote on receipt. Is there anyone opposed to receipt? Seeing none, that's carried. And the recommendation that staff be directed to develop an update to the Lazo Hill groundwater protection policy. Would somebody like to move that, please? Moved by Grant, seconded by McCollum. Further discussion? All those in favor? Anyone opposed? That's carried. Before we move on, I'd like to just acknowledge that in the audience today, we also have Chair Kettler, who has been attending these meetings to show her support and engagement in the major projects that are involved, and we appreciate your presence, Chair. So we are now moving through to our in-camera recommendation that the commission adjourn to an in-camera session pursuant to section 90 and 91K of the community charter, that being negotiations and related discussions respecting the proposed provision of a regional district service. Somebody please move that recommendation. Moved by McCollum, seconded by Hazlitt. Thanks very much, Captain Newham. I'll try and get you in the minutes next time. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? That's